Welcome to week number 36 of our Bible study of the book of Romans. We are going to be looking at Romans chapter 11, verses 16 through 24. Again, a quick recap of where we're at in the flow of the study of Romans. Paul is kind of explaining how Israel fits in, right? Like he's done a good job of talking about how God is faithful to his people, to his covenants that he's made with humanity and with Israel throughout history. That's what the first section of Romans is, chapters 1 through 4. 5 through 8 is the rescue plan that through Israel, despite their failings and even through their failings, the law was given, and the law was meant to bring life, which Jesus was able to do, so that we can continue his work, his vocation of rescuing the world. And then we get to chapter 9 through where we start talking about the progress so far, basically, that this is where Israel stands now, that their role has in essence been fulfilled in Christ. And so we saw in chapter 10, verse 5, that Israel now fits in with God working to rescue them. Like they have kind of stepped outside by not having faith in the Messiah. And the work that God's been doing all along, there's many who do not participate in that faith. And that through that disbelief, that a people who weren't looking for salvation found it, and those who were looking for it missed it. And chapter 11 is basically kind of answering the question of, well, is God done with Israel then, right? If they've rejected him, if they've rejected his Messiah, is God done with them? And so step one, Paul talks about the remnant, that there is a remnant of grace, of people who love Jesus, have faith in Jesus within Israel, and that remnant will always be there. And that's kind of a very big biblical theme throughout all of the Old Testament and Israel's history, that there's always a remnant who remain faithful, except this remnant is a remnant because of their faith, not because of the works that they do. And then step two, which is what we talked about last time, is how little bros, Gentiles, tend to succeed the big bros when it comes to matters of faith and righteousness. And so it's not that the Gentiles have superseded that the Israelites, which is what we're going to talk about today, but rather that because of what the big bro did and his faithfulness, that's how little bro gets to be part of the family. And so last week we looked at, we finished up with verses 11 through 15. It says, "So I ask then, have they tripped up in such a manner as to completely fall?" Talking about Israel. "Certainly not. Rather, by their trespass, salvation has come to the nations in order to make them jealous. If their trespass means riches for the world, and their impoverishment means riches for the nations, how much more will their fullness mean? Now I'm speaking to you Gentiles. Insofar as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I celebrate my particular ministry, so that, if possible, I can make my flesh," read Israel, "jealous and save some of them. If their casting away, you see, means reconciliation for the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead?" See, Paul says that even though his role is to lead the Gentiles, the non-Israelites, to salvation, to faith in Christ, and then into the vocation that Christ died for them to do, he's also at the same time using their acceptance, their participation in God's family, as a means to make Israel jealous, so they will in turn believe in Christ. I mean, we see that Israel's story is the Messiah's story. That's kind of what he gets at there. And I'll just summarize all of that with what N.T. Wright said in his commentary, Paul for Everyone, Romans Part 2, on page 51, where he says, Paul is asking us to imagine that what has happened to ethnic Israel in the purposes of God is nothing short of an acting out of what happened to the Messiah. He was brought low so that the world might be lifted up. He was cast away for the reconciliation of the world and brought back to life so that all might live through him. God has, as it were, written the story of the Messiah into a larger history as the story of the Messiah's people according to the flesh. The only way Paul knows how to understand what has happened to Israel is the pattern of Jesus the Messiah, the one in whom all God's secret wisdom is now revealed. And that gets us to today's section, verses 16 through 24 of chapter 11. He says, "Take another illustration. If the first fruits are holy, so is the whole lump. And another, if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and came to share in the root of the olive with its rich sap, don't boast over the branches. If you do boast, remember this, it isn't you that supports the root, but the root that supports you." I know what you'll say next. "Branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in." That's all very well. They were broken off because of unbelief. but you stand firm by faith. Don't get big ideas about it. Instead, be afraid. After all, if God didn't spare the natural branches, there's a strong possibility he won't spare you. Note carefully then that God is both kind and severe. He is severe to those who have fallen, but he is kind to you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. And they too, if they do not remain in unbelief, will be grafted back in. God is able, you see, to graft them back in. For if you were cut out of what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will they, the natural branches, be grafted back in to their own olive tree? So Paul basically uses this section to kind of like illustrate his point. That's basically all it says, just two illustrations. And it's again asking the question, or answering the question rather, is God done with Israel? As we said, there's a remnant. Like Paul himself, he is a part of that remnant by grace within Israel. But he's kind of asking the question, answering the question, well, is he done with everybody else though? Like he has the remnant say, but is God like, is he done with them? And again, you need to understand the context here, because it seems like a weird question to ask to us, standing 2,000 years later in a completely secular society. Why would Paul be addressing this? If you remember back to the context of the book of Romans, that the Jewish community was kicked out of Rome. The gospel showed up pretty early on after Christ ascended, and the Jewish people brought it there because Rome was the center of the world. So there are people in Jerusalem during Pentecost, during all of that then took the gospel to Rome. And so it got established, but then the emperor kicked out the Jewish population from the city of Rome. So you had all these Gentile Christians who didn't have anybody who knew the history of Israel. And as we're going to talk about, it's very much a Jewish story that lays the foundation. The roots of the tree of Christianity are Jewish. And so it's like you had this time where there was no Jewish representation, if you want to think in those terms. There was nobody who knew the stuff the way they should have to guide the church. And so this period of Gentile-only Christianity within Rome happened. And then the Jews were welcomed back in. And now they're living this out, this how do we fit together now, right? You had a very short period where they lived together as Christians, and then they were separated, and now they're back together. And so it's figuring this out, this tension, because obviously if you read throughout Romans, there's obviously a tension between the Gentile and the Jewish converts. Really, you read all of the New Testament, you find this tension there. How do we learn to live together as one family? Because getting this question wrong has led to horrible things throughout history. There's been atrocities committed by Christians and non-Christians against Jewish people in the name of getting this question wrong. Is God done with Israel? And so he starts out with verse 16 with a rather simple illustration. He talks about the first fruits, talking about that remnant, that the remnant of grace within Israel, those who believe in Christ now, they're the first fruits. And so if you're unfamiliar with this, in the sacrificial system, when you would start your harvest, the very first things you would harvest, you would offer up to God. Right? It's not your whole sacrifice. It's just the very beginnings to say that, hey, all this is possible because of what God has blessed me with. I'm giving him this part right off the bat. And in that, it's implying that there's going to be more sacrifice made. And so the first fruits are this remnant, but it implies that there's going to be more, right? So starting off, like, yes, there are those outside the family within Israel, those who don't have faith in Christ, that are outside. They truly are. But it's implying that God's not done with them yet, right? And so you can't imply, based on this illustration, that those Israelites who are outside of the family of God now, that you can't imply that they are somehow or unholy, or that we can't try to reach them with the gospel, or even worse, that we shouldn't try to reach them with the gospel. So Paul is making it clear after that. No, like, yeah, we're the first fruits, guys like me, but there's more to come. We can't ignore them or rule them out or shun them. And then he goes into the two olive trees. And olive trees, I don't know if you know this, but they're kind of hard to kill. We have several trees around here on the church property that we cut down years ago that still put shoots back up, that we've poured salt on them, we've covered them with rocks and tar. Like, they just keep coming back no matter what we do, it seems like. That's kind of the way olive trees are. And so Paul, first off, by calling Israel an olive tree, well, he's saying they're going to continue on. All right? You're not going to be able to cut them and destroy them easily. They're going to keep going on century after century. That's the way olive trees grow. And then he continues on. He starts talking about wild olive trees and cultivated olive trees. See, wild olive trees grow rapidly, right? They grow really fast. They produce a lot of olives, a lot of fruit. But most of the time that fruit is bad. It's not what you would want to use to make olive oil or to eat. It's wasted, basically. Yes, that tree is growing a lot, producing a lot, but it's not really producing what you want it to produce. It's got a lot of energy, a lot of life, but it's kind of useless. Cultivated olive trees, on the other hand, produce the fruit that you want. It's the stuff you make olive oil out of. It's the stuff you eat. But they grow slow. And so throughout history, farmers have learned that, hey, if I take some of these cultivated olive branches, these trees, and take some branches off them and graft them onto these wild trees, they start producing the fruit I want faster. Because all the energy that is in the wild trees, it causes those cultivated branches to grow faster, to produce more. But it's the kind of fruit you want. And so what Paul is saying is, hey, we're grafting onto this tree. Now in verse 24, he says it's contrary to nature because nobody would graft a wild olive tree branch onto a cultivated tree, because then you've got bad fruit that grows slow. Like, it's backwards, right? And so again, in that, Paul is kind of saying, hey, it's a miracle. This isn't the way it's supposed to work, that the Gentiles, the wild olive tree, are being grafted onto the cultivated tree, and it's producing the good fruit. Like, it's a miracle in its own right. But Israel is that cultivated tree he's talking about. It's planted by God. It's nurtured. It's cared for. It's the designed tree that the farmer wants. But he says many branches of it have been cut off because they do not have faith in Christ. And even more branches have been grafted in from the wild olive trees, from the Gentiles, because they do have faith in Christ. The point is that this is backwards, but it works. That everybody is producing the fruit that they're supposed to be producing because they're grafted into one family tree. And so we can kind of get four things from this, right? The first is that the Jews who don't have faith in Jesus truly are off the tree, right? Paul says that God is severe to those he has cut off. Right? That those who are not in the family of God are those who do not have faith in Christ. It doesn't matter if you are Israelite or not. If you do not have faith in Christ, you are not part of the family on God. But verse 23, he says that they can be grafted back in if they come back to faith, if they have faith in Jesus as the Messiah. But until then, they are truly out. Nobody gets to bypass Jesus and be part of the family of God. The second thing is the people of God are truly a single family. We're all part of one tree. From chapter 4 onward, he focuses on the seed of Abraham, those who inherit the promises of Abraham, to be part of the family of Abraham, the family of God. And it's through faith. And over and over and over throughout Romans, he sees the people of God, both Gentile and Jewish, as one family. And using this illustration, he sees that the Jewish it's a Jewish family. Like, it is the Jewish tree that the Gentiles are grafted onto, not the other way around. That we are our roots are Jewish, but we are now something new, something better, something miraculous. But then because of that, and the third thing that we can get from this, because of the Jewish nature, God is going to graft many Jews back in. And again, this is more context to that day, he was trying to get his Gentile believers, his Gentile readers, to understand that just because they're not in now doesn't mean they won't be. That you can't shun them, you can't avoid them, you can't treat them like they are somehow incapable of believing the gospel. Because Paul is working towards that. But because of the family it has Jewish roots, the Christians have Jewish roots, it'll be easier for them to be grafted back in, actually, than it is for Gentiles, because it's the tree from which they were already cut. And again, the point here is to teach unity within the Roman church between all ethnicities. And the last thing we can see is that the Gentiles have not replaced the Jews. And that's kind of like the main focus of both of these illustrations, that the Gentiles, they are welcomed in, they're in full standing, they're on equal footing with their Jewish counterparts, but they have not replaced the Jews. They have not replaced the Israelites. To think this way would be to make the same mistake in reverse as the Judaizers did. That you have to become Jewish in order to become a Christian. Like, it's the same thing, just the opposite way. That no one is saved because of their birthright. It doesn't matter who you were born to, who your parents were, what your ethnicity is, where you were born, how wealthy you were born into, how poor you were born into. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that saving faith in Jesus. As N.T. Wright says in this commentary, God is both kind and severe. So long as we remain in his kindness, we will avoid his severity. Nobody gets a pass, but he is unlimited in his kindness towards those who are part of his family. Hope this helps you understand and answer that question a little bit better of, is God done with Israel? If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.